Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Parky, and we're going to be going over another Phyrexia All Will Be One set review, and this time in red. So we'll be going through each mana cost and ranking cards from worst to best based on what we feel should fill out your curve in each color. It's going to definitely vary based on what archetypes you're going to be playing in your limited formats, but this is going to be strictly related to limited. So there will be some cards that may have a little bit more purpose in standard and all historic and everything, but we're just going to ignore that to kind of be a little bit more directed. You guys can comment below on what you guys think is maybe your favorite in each mana cost, and you guys can also join me on Monday nights at 9:30 on Twitch under the same name. Feel free to drop a like and subscribe. Do whatever you got to do. It all helps in the end. So let's jump right into it. With our 1-drops, we've got Exuberant Fuseling, 1 mana, 0/1 creature with trample, and it gets +1/+0 for each oil counter on it. And when it ETBs and whenever another creature or artifact is put into the graveyard from battlefield, put an oil counter on Exuberant Fuseling. So not a bad card, but it's going to be super slow and an aggressive sort of color. So I think it's not going to really scale out to its uncommon rank. And to touch on too, by the way, this is going to be not related to the rarity. So you're going to see some rares and mythics being the worst and some commons being the best. So next is Sawblade Scamp, 1 mana, 1/1 creature with haste. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on Sawblade Scamp, and then tap, remove an oil counter from Sawblade Scamp, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So not awful. It's a little bit slow. It's not going to do much after turn 2 or turn 3. So I think it's kind of got a small upside to it, but nothing special. And then we're on to Churning Reservoir, 1 mana artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, put an oil counter on another target non-token artifact or creature you control. 2 and tap. Create a 1/1 red Phyrexian Goblin creature token. Activate only if an oil counter was removed from a permanent you control this turn, or a permanent with an oil counter on it was put into a graveyard this turn. It's a very wordy card. So honestly, pretty good for any oil deck. This is going to be a great 1-drop because it's just going to get your oil counters going, mainly in your blue-red deck. So pretty good, but nothing crazy. On to our next 1-drop, Cacophony Scamp. Maybe? I think that's how you pronounce it. 1 mana, 1/1 creature. Whenever Cacophony Scamp deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice it. If you do, proliferate. And when Cacophony Scamp dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So we've seen that before. Proliferate is you can choose any number of permanents and or players and give them another counter of each kind already there. So it's going to be really good with poison counters. It's going to be really good with oil counters. It's going to be good with +1/+1 counters. And then there's some indestructible counters in the set too. If I'm forgetting any, then you can figure that out for yourself, but we might even see some later. So solid card, honestly. If you can put some some equipments on this card, buff its power, it's going to be really strong. We've seen some cards like that where you put equipment on them, and they are very popular in the aggressive decks. So really like this card. But then the best card for red 1-drops is going to be Vindictive Flame Stoker. So 1 mana, 1/2 creature. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on it, and tap 7, 6 in a mountain. Sacrifice Vindictive Flame Stoker, discard your hand, and then draw 4 cards. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each oil counter on Vindictive Flame Stoker. So really good if you want to just get some oil counters down on a creature, and then really you can sacrifice this, draw 4 cards mid-game, and really get ahead in the aggro deck. So I like this. I know this isn't really for aggro because oil counters are mid-range to late game. It's a little bit more control with a mix of blue. I'm not entirely sure which direction that deck's going to be heading, but yeah, no, it looks like a solid card to me, so I really enjoy it, but it is at rare, so it kind of makes sense. On to red 2-drops, we have Barbed Batterfist, 2 mana artifact for Mirrodin. We'll get into that in a second. Equipped creatures get +1/-1, and then equip 1. So for Mirrodin is when the equipment enters the battlefield, you create a 2/2 red rebel creature token, and then attach the equipment to it. So really what you're getting on the battlefield is a 3/1, and then you can equip it to something else and you still keep that 2/2 on the board. So while that seems decent, I think that the Barbed Batter Fist isn't going to help you with maybe pushing through. Maybe you might push through a little bit of damage extra early, but it doesn't seem like it's going to do a whole lot otherwise. So on to Axiom Engraver, 2 mana, 1/3 creature. When it ETBs, it comes in with 2 oil counters on it, and then you can tap, remove an oil counter, and then you can discard and draw. So not bad, but the fact that it doesn't always do that and it kind of runs out, it's just a 1/3 after a while, I'm not a fan of that, so that's why it's kind of low on my list. Next is a reprint, Thrill of Possibility, 2 mana instant. As an additional cost, you discard a card and then you draw 2. So pretty standard, good filter card for red, as it doesn't have too much card draw, so I like it in the end. On to Shrapnel Slinger, 2 mana, 2/2 artifact creature. When it ETBs, you may sacrifice a creature. When you do, destroy target artifact an opponent controls. And I think this is really good value for a 2-drop, especially at common, and the fact that there's going to be tons of strong artifacts in the set. I think this is going to be a very good card. You're going to want to pick this decently early to fill out that 2-drop spot. Next is Hellgold Halberd, 2 mana artifact equipment for Mirrodin again, and as long as it's your turn, equipped creature has first strike and trample. So you get a 2 mana first strike trample on turn 2, and then it has equip 3, so when that card dies, then you could make anything else have first strike and trample. So I think that's fantastic on its own, and any equipment deck, any of the white-red aggro decks are going to want this because it's just gonna put through damage really well. And now on to our 3-drops. We have Forge Hammer Centurion, 3 mana 3/2 creature. Whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on Forge Hammer Centurion. Whenever it attacks, you may remove 2 oil counters from it, and then target creature can't block this turn. So it's okay, but I'm not a big fan of it because it doesn't come into play with any oil counters on it, and it also takes a bit for it even to be able to tap or make something not be able to block. And it's also 2 toughness, so I think that's going to trade down most of the time, so pretty weak for me. Next is Furnace Punisher, 3 mana 3/3 creature menace. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, it deals 2 damage to that player unless they control 2 or more basic lands. So honestly, not a big fan of this in limited. It seems like a good card in otherwise in standard. It is a 3/3 menace for 3, but I still think that there are better 3-drops in this. Especially at uncommon, I feel like you're gonna probably be wavering between getting this card and then picking up some, say, removal or something, and you're gonna want to take the removal. Next is Slowbad Iron Goblin, 3 mana 3/3. Legendary creature, tap, sacrifice an artifact, add an amount of mountains equal to the sacrifice artifact's mana value. Spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activated abilities of artifacts. So it's alright. I'm not a big fan of these kind of sacrifice your artifacts that you probably want on the battlefield. I would say in limited you're going to find this card is a little bit too slow. The fact that you've got to remove things off your board and then potentially just cast an artifact, and you have to make sure you have a lot of artifacts, maybe high costing artifacts. So I think this card's a little bit too narrow for limited. Next you have Kuldotha Cackler, 3 mana 2/3 creature with trample. Whenever it attacks, it gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of permanents you control with oil counters. So I think this is a very solid card because you have 1 or 2 on the battlefield, and this can be artifacts, this can be creatures. I think this is going to be a very good card because a 4 mana or a 3 mana 4/3 trample, 3 mana 3/3 trample is going to be very good in this set. Next we have Blade Graft Aspirant, 3 mana 2/3 creature with menace. Equipment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and then activated abilities of equipment you control that target Blade Graft Aspirant cost 1 less to activate. So this is a really good card for all your equipment decks. It's got menace, so it's got a little bit of evasion on it. It's got a little bit of a butt, so it's not a 3/2, it's a 2/3, so it's going to be pretty solid. And then you add an equipment on top of that, and this creature seems great. So I really enjoy this card for those sort of decks. Next is Urabrask's Forge. 3 mana artifact. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put an oil counter on Urabrask's Forge, then create an X1 red Phyrexian horror creature token with trample and haste where X is the number of oil counters on it. So, and then you sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. So really good card. It's going to start off with a 1/1, but sooner or later you're going to have a 3/3, 4/4, 5, or sorry, 3/1, 4/1, 5/1. And this card is going to really pop off if somebody doesn't deal with it. So I just think it's going to be great value for these sort of decks that just want to keep pushing through. Like trample and haste is fantastic. So really like it. And then the best card I have at 3 drops is Magmatic Sprinter, 3 mana, 3/2 creature, haste. When it enters the battlefield, you put 2 oil counters on target artifact or creature you control. Now at the beginning of your end step, you return it to your hand, or the owner's hand, unless you remove 2 oil counters from it. So really enjoy this card. I think it's fantastic. It's going to put oil counters on a bunch of creatures that want those oil counters, and they can utilize them the way that they need to, and you're going to see lots of synergies and lots of uses for this card. And the fact that it only costs 3 to keep throwing down, especially later in the game, you can just keep doing this while doing your own thing on the side. It's going to be fantastic. So really strong card. You're going to want to pick that up if you see it. For 4 drops, our worst one is Volshock Splitter. 4 mana artifact equipment with 4 Mirrodin. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and then equip cost of 3. So you're getting a 4/2 on the field for 4, and then you've got to equip for 3. I think this is too expensive, and I think it's just not going to really fit in limited. Next is Awaken the Sleeper, 4 mana sorcery, a typical gain control of target creature card till end of turn. And then you're just going to destroy any equipment that's equipped to it if you want. It even says may, so you could even use those equipments to your advantage, so I like the flexibility there too. But there is a little bit of sacrifice stuff in black, but you've got to be able to put those together, and this is always a very narrow direction that you want to head in your drafts. So I don't always love these, but it's always fun to try. Next is Chimney Rabble, 4 mana 3/3 creature with haste. When it ETBs, create a 1/1 Phyrexian Goblin creature token. So not bad. I mean, 4 mana, 3/3 haste. You get another body. You know, there's sacrifice stuff. You can put up a blocker with that too. So I think it's an okay card. I think it's a good filler for an aggro deck, but it's not going to do a whole lot otherwise. Next is Hazardous Blast, 4 mana sorcery. It deals 1 damage to each creature your opponents control, and creatures your opponents control can't block this turn. This is kind of a finisher move, but you have to have that power on the board, and it's a little risky. And you know what? Sometimes this is going to be good, and sometimes this is not going to do anything at all. So I'm just going to say this is a very mid card for your 4-drop spot, but that's basically it. Next is Urabrask's Anointer, 4 mana 4/2 artifact creature. When it ETBs, it deals X damage to any target where X is the number of permanents you control with oil counters on them. And even though it's got 2 toughness at the back, these cards are always fantastic. They remove a creature, or they deal damage directly to the player. You know, 3-4 damage does its job, and I really enjoy these cards in these sort of sets. Next is Solfim Mayhem Dominus, one of the Dominus cards. There's 1 in each color. 4 mana, 2 and 2 red, 5/4 legendary creature. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or a permanent opponent controls, it deals double that damage to that player or permanent instead. And then it has 1 mana and 2 Phyrexian mana. Discard 2 cards, put an indestructible counter on itself. So you can pay those Phyrexian mana with either 2 life or Mountain. And this works really good with the sorcery on the previous page, because obviously that can deal 2 damage to each creature the opponent controls and potentially clear out a lot of their creatures. And this is just a really good card in general. These sort of cards really seem to have a good place in red, and the fact that there are indestructible counters on top of that seem fantastic too. It is discard 2 cards, but I think that, you know, you'll be building up some lands in your hand, and you can kind of use those to your advantage here if you know you have this in your deck. So overall, very good card. On to Koth, Fire of Resistance, our first Planeswalker at 4 mana, 4 loyalty, +2, search your library for a basic mountain card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. -3 Koth deals damage to target creature equal to the number of mountains you control. And then -7, you get an emblem whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under your control. This emblem deals 4 damage to any target. So really strong, great for ramping you, which isn't often in red. And then it does clear off some creatures if you need it to. I can do that right away too, which is great. And then you might use the -7 and get some damage through, but in limited, this isn't going to be as prominent just based on the number of mountains you have in your deck. So I would say that I would focus more on the -3 part, but still a really good removal tactic in red. So I would say definitely the best 4-drop for this color. Alright, on to our 5 drops. We have the staple card of the set, All Will Be One, 5 mana enchantment coming in at our worst 5+ drop. Whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, All Will Be One will deal that much damage to target opponent, creature an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. So I think that this card is going to be a little bit too slow for oil counters. I think a lot of them are going to be in the battlefield already by that time that you've played it. And I think it's going to do very little once it hits the board. And people are going to overvalue this a little bit at the start, and they're going to realize that it's just not doing a whole lot. In standard, I could see this being a little bit better, but just in the limited format, it's a little too slow. On to Oxida Finisher, 7 mana 7/5 creature with affinity for equipment, so the number of equipments you control makes this cost 1 less. And then trample, so not bad. It's a big body with trample, but it depends on what you cast it for, because if you cast this for, 5 mana, that's a fantastic rate for it. But if you are casting it for 7, a 7/5 is a little bit expensive, but it depends. So decent card all around. All these cards are pretty good actually at this cost, so there aren't really any bad cards apart from All Will Be One. So next is Resistance Skywarden, 5 mana 5/5 creature with menace and reach. Just a solid body with a little bit of evasion and good protection in the air, because they're quite a bit of flyers. So this is going to be a good thing for you to have late game in your red deck. So pretty solid card all around. Next is Furnace Strider, 5 mana 4/5 creature. ETBs with 2 oil counters on it, and you can remove an oil counter. Target creature you control gains haste until end of turn. So really good. It can give it to itself, it can give it to other creatures. It can just help you constantly put damage through. And remember, you can always add oil counters to it too, so keep that in mind with your creatures that have oil counter effects. So it might allow them to do a little bit more than what their card says, so they're not limited just to that too. Next is Capricious Hellraiser, 6 mana, 3 or mountains, 4/4 creature, and it has flying, and this spell costs 3 less if you have 9 or more cards in your graveyard. And when it ETBs, exile 3 cards at random from your graveyard, choose a non-creature, non-land card from among them and copy it. You may cast that copy without paying its mana cost. So you're getting really a 6 mana 4/4 flyer. Pretty good. And then it could be a 3 mana 4/4 flyer, which is fantastic, and it potentially casts a instant sorcery or artifact card. Equipment, there's a lot of things that I can grab in this, so I think this card's fantastic. It just, the mana cost makes it a little hard, and you might have to be mono red or a light splash of another color. You might even get away with just having like any normal dual color deck, but it's going to be a little difficult, a little bit more narrow if you don't have the right fixing. So that's why our next card is slightly better at Dragon Wing Glider, 5 mana artifact equipment with 4 Mirrodin. Equipped a creature gets +2/+2 flying and haste, and then equip 5. So you technically get a 4/4 flying and haste rebel token. And then when that dies, you can make any other creature that comes in. So you keep playing cheap creatures and equipping it to it. You're going to have a bunch of bodies just coming in and attacking for a good amount. And I think this is like your staple aggro bomb. This is a fantastic card. I think this is a first pick anytime you can get it. And yeah, I think this is going to be the best card in red. On to our interaction removal. We have our worst at Gleeful Demolition, 1 mana sorcery, destroy target artifact. If you control that artifact, create 3/1/1 goblin creature tokens. It's okay, it's not doing anything special. You're probably not going to want to use it on your own thing. and just being able to destroy an artifact makes it a little bit more narrow. But there are a lot of artifacts, so it's not horrible, but I do see that there are other better removal in the set. Next is Nahiri's Sacrifice, 2 mana sorcery. As an additional cost, you can sacrifice an artifact or creature with mana value X, and then it deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures. A little bit narrow on the fact that you have to sacrifice something, so you can't just use it to remove something. It's got to be big enough to remove what you're trying to remove, and you're probably going to want to leave that on the board. So I don't enjoy this card so much because it weakens your board state to weaken theirs. So that's where I have Nahiri's Sacrifice. On to Molten Rebuke, 5 mana sorcery, pretty similar to other rebukes you've seen, but you get choose one or both. Deal 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker, or destroy target equipment. So this is going to be a decent card. It's got a little bit of flexibility. I like the fact that you can do 2 things with it, which makes it at a better rate for 5 mana. But it's not going to be your best because it's a little bit more expensive, especially for an aggressive color. On to Free from Flesh, 1 mana instant, target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and you put 2 oil counters on it. I think this is good interaction. I think it's going to do what you want in oil counter decks. This can really add up on any creatures. There's the blue flyer that when it dies, it gets more, you can draw more cards. There's the other flyer that the more oil counters it gets, the bigger it is. There's a lot of uses for this card. And then you have the haste creature in this set, or in this color, where you can just make more creatures have haste as it survives your combat. So I think it's a fantastic card. I would definitely pick this if you're in oil counters, but I wouldn't have more than probably 1. Next is Red Sun's Twilight. Each color has a Twilight, and this one is a pay 2 mountains and X sorcery, destroy up to X target artifacts. If X is 5 or more, for each artifact destroyed this way, create a token that's a copy of it. Those tokens gain haste, exile them at the beginning of the next end step. So I think this is going to be really good against certain decks. It's not going to be very good against your green decks, and there's probably some other decks that you're going to find you're up against that just don't have as many artifacts on the battlefield. So I would keep an eye out for it, but it is a little bit narrow with only targeting artifacts. Next is Blazing Crescendo, 2 mana instant. Target creature gets +3/+1 until end of turn. Exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. So a little bit of card advantage, a little bit of a buff. Maybe it helps you put through some extra damage. Maybe it kills a creature. Maybe it allows you to survive combat. So I think this is pretty good. If this didn't give your toughness a buff, I think this would drop down quite a bit, but it's doing a pretty good job in red. Next is your cheapest removal at Hex Gold Slash. For 1 mana instant, it deals 2 damage to target creature, and then if it's a toxic creature, then it deals 4 damage to it instead. So really good. There's a lot of toxic creatures in the set, so this is going to do exactly what you want in red as a cheap common. Next is Rebel Salvo, 3 mana instant with affinity for equipment. Salvo deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. That permanent loses indestructible until end of turn. So this is going to be really good against that one creature that's going to be in each color. I find that this is also going to help in standard a lot more too, but I like the fact that the affinity really makes this cheap. For potentially 1 mana, you're going to be dealing 5 damage to target creature at instant speed or planeswalker. So really good, really flexible, really cheap, and it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be hard to pick up at uncommon, so grab it when you can. Next is Volt Charge, 3 mana instant, deal 3 damage to any target, proliferate. And I believe this is a reprint. This is a really good common. This is going to be your best pickup if there isn't a bomb in your pack and you want to play red. So this is going to go by very fast, and you're going to want 2 to 3 of these in each deck that you're playing. And that's going to be it for the red review. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, like and subscribe. Comment below on what you guys think should move up and down. This is kind of a discussion for me. So obviously, this set's very new. Nobody's really tested out where things are going to fall. So really excited for this set. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Check out the other reviews if you guys like this one. And it's going to be it for me. So I'll see you guys later. Ciao.